Hi, I'm Amber Mack, and thank you so much for having me at EngAGE 2021. Today, I'm going to be talking about relentless adaptation and really setting the scene in terms of technology trends that are in a state of acceleration right now during COVID-19. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is show you a series of photos at St. Peter's Square, starting way back in 2005. As you can see in this photo, not a lot of technology except for a person holding a tiny little flip phone in the bottom right-hand corner. Fast forward 8 years to 2013, almost every single person that is gathered at St. Peter's Square has some type of mobile device in their hands. And then when we go to the spring of 2020, also St. Peter's Square, no one is gathered and the Pope is live streaming on Zoom just like the rest of us. So a lot happened within 15 years. What's happening today? Well, we know when it comes to the Internet of Things, we are seeing billions of devices connected to the Internet, about 50 billion as of 2020. That's such a massive number, it's hard to really put that into context. So imagine it like this. The average household with 2 teenage children will own roughly 50 Internet-connected devices by the year 2022. I went through my house just the other day and counted how many connected devices I have, and we're at about 32 in the home, so we're slowly approaching that number. We're also at the beginning of the artificial intelligence revolution, something you're probably hearing a lot about, a massive market worth about $36.8 billion by 2025. I've been speaking and talking about AI for the past few years, and the number one question I get asked over and over again at events is this. When it comes to AI, will AI kill us all? This is a top concern for people when they're thinking about the future. And why is that? Well, it doesn't help that we are inundated with images like this in the media. We also see technology leaders such as Elon Musk who are saying things like this. When it comes to the future, we'll be lucky if the robots enslave us as pets. We even hear researchers and scientists talking about the future in these terms.
In a recent op-ed column, you said, and I quote, "Success in creating artificial intelligence would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last." Are you saying that robots are going to destroy humanity? And is that a scientific argument or the pitch for an amazing movie?
Artificial intelligence could be a real danger in the not-too-distant future. It could design improvements to itself and outsmart us all.
I know you're trying to get people to be cautious there, but why should I not be excited about fighting a robot?
You would lose.
So why am I still optimistic about the future knowing all of this? Well, the one thing that we have to remember is that humans are actually pretty good at adapting to new technologies. We've done it throughout history. As one example, we can look back to 1857 and the world's first passenger elevator. And what we saw at that time is how fearful people were about getting into one of these elevators that would essentially shoot them up into a building. And at the same time, we know how important that's been for vertical transportation. If you read a little about the history of the elevator, you learn very quickly that it actually took people decades to finally feel comfortable getting into an elevator. But eventually they did, and now people don't think too much about it. But what is different today is the rate of change that we're experiencing. Truth is, change has never happened this fast before, and as Graham Wood says, it will never be this slow again. This is especially true during COVID-19. We've seen acceleration take place that none of us in this industry ever expected. In e-commerce, as one example, many people are saying that we've seen 5 years of change happen within mere months. Still, I'm optimistic, especially when I look to the next generation, and I've watched how they've been able to adapt over the past year. And there's no better example of this than in the classroom of Mrs. Allison, a grade 3-4 teacher who was told, like many teachers across the country in September, that they could no longer sing O Canada in class because there was a risk of spreading the virus. So what did she decide to do? She decided to teach her students how to sign. Amazing to see that adaptation take place. What I want to talk about today is 4 technology trends that are in a state of acceleration. But I don't just want to leave it there. I also want to give you lessons to be able to survive and thrive during this time of change. The first trend is the voice-first era. We're seeing more and more that people are interacting using voice first as they interact with different types of technology. If we think about smart speakers as one example, we're seeing more people using smart speakers in the home and also using voice assistants within their phones. About 50% of all people last year interacted with voice assistants with their smartphone or with a smart speaker. So it essentially is a new way of communicating, and it really reaches all ages. And when it comes to acceleration, we're seeing the adoption of smart speakers, especially with more and more people who've been spending time at home. And why is this? Well, not just because we're at home, but also we have to remember, based on this study at Stanford, that people speak 3 times faster than they type. So voice is a much more natural way of communicating than even text. And when we look at this adoption in terms of consumer habits, what we're seeing today, again, is more people are getting comfortable with this, even an older generation. In the US, they just came out with a report from Parks Associates that has said that 34% of US seniors are using smart speakers or smart displays. So when we go back to that term acceleration, we're seeing it in all age groups. Just think about an aging population today at home that has been in many ways forced into using new technologies and now is leveraging the power of social media, smart speakers, even platforms like Zoom. So when we think about the future of voice, there's probably no better place to travel than the city of Las Vegas. And what we're seeing in that city is that they have decided that voice is a natural and beneficial way for residents to be able to communicate with the city. They've made it possible through Amazon Alexa, through the smart speaker, so people who have them in their homes are able to ask simple things like, which parks have tennis courts? When is the next council meeting? What is the status of my building permit? For people who can't leave the house or have trouble reading a screen, imagine the ease of use in this scenario. Now, they haven't just done this because it's another flashy thing that you see in the city of Las Vegas. One of the reasons that they have done this is they recognize that smart speakers are much more affordable than even a new smartphone or a laptop. To buy a new phone or a laptop, we're talking up to $1,000, sometimes even more. And yet you can get a smart speaker for $30, $40, $50. So when we see the price tag come down in terms of the technology and consumer habits rise as far as ease of use with voice, we know that this is a trend that's going to continue. Now let's think for a second about the magic of sound and the magic of audio. Now, when we think about the future of technology, we also have to remember many of the innovations made possible that have allowed people to be able to see better and hear better. Here's a short video of people hearing for the very first time thanks to new tech.
There you go. It's beeping. So now technically your device is on. Can you tell? You said you hear it. Hi, Cooper. Hi, Cooper. Hi, Cooper. Bop, 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 bop.
Hello, he's smiling.
What do you think?
Hi, baby.
Sounds good.
I know I look like an elderly munchkin, but do I sound like one now?
So as much as we want to blame technology in our lives, it's important to remember the positive side of tech. When it comes to the future of voice and the future of audio, we're also seeing podcasts on the rise. About 27% of Canadian adults are listening to podcasts on a regular basis. It's a much more intimate way to hear a story. We're also seeing within social networks the rise of audio-first social networks and features. Clubhouse is a great example of this, a social network where you can go and have almost like a conference call that happens through the app. And what's interesting is that in a short amount of time, Clubhouse is now valued at about $1 billion. another sign that we're seeing out there in terms of the future of voice first. And finally, when we think about audio and voice, we think about how much time we've been spending on all of these platforms to do video calls. And a great example of a tool I've been using for a while is called Otter.ai, and it allows you to get real-time transcriptions. Within Google Meet, as one example, imagine how useful that can be in terms of engaging in video calls and then having the actual transcript in real time, and even a transcript that you're able to share within your organization. So we know more and more when it comes to the future of voice. This is going to continue to be a trend that is in a state of acceleration. What does it mean for all of us? Well, we have to plan for this idea of a voice-first era, and I want to give you a site that you can bookmark right now and check out. It's called voicebot.ai, and it's a fantastic resource. They also have a podcast as well that will help you understand the future of voice, and there are many articles that talk about how voice can be useful for all different generations. The next thing I want to talk about is machines in the wild, and this includes robots, but it also includes autonomous vehicles. And what will it be like the first time you get into one of those self-driving cars?
Hey, hooray! We're like queens. Yeah.
You said relax. You don't need to do nothing. It knows when it needs to stop. It knows when it needs to go.
It actually rides better than my own car.
Yes, sure.
What she really liked was that it slowed down before it went around a curve and then accelerated
In the curve.
curve. She's always trying to get me to do it that way.
That's the way I learned in a high school driver's ed.
So here is yet another example of thinking about technology through the lens of accessibility for people who can no longer drive. This is like magic. Just yesterday, I was moderating a panel talking about the future of autonomous vehicles, and a gentleman on the panel said something that I probably will never forget. He believes that there is going to be a time when humans are not allowed to drive cars at all because it's just too dangerous. We know from many studies out there when it comes to any type of fatal accidents, more than 90% of those accidents are because of human error. So there is the potential that we can do a lot better and incorporate technology. But the question is it going to be perfect? And the answer is no, especially right out of the gate. And I'm reminded of a quote from Voltaire: "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." When we think about all of the technology that we're incorporating in our lives and all different populations are using, chances are it's not going to be perfect right away. But it will be good and it will make our lives better. And that is the promise of most technologies, only if humans have a significant role. We're also seeing robots in the wild in different areas in the world. In Japan, as one example, their government has a robot strategy where they said by 2020, last year, that 4 out of 5 care recipients would be taken care of in part by a robot. We also saw a study from the University of Auckland in 2019 in terms of robots in homes. They actually placed robots in the homes of an aging population, and the study said that based on their research, they saw a decrease in primary care visits and an increase in quality of life. And one of the reasons they said that this happened was mere companionship of the robots. And I know in an ideal scenario, we would have people in homes with our seniors, but we also know at the same time that that is not always possible. So this can inevitably really fill that gap. When we look at healthcare institutions in Europe as another example, we're seeing robots being used in hospitals. This is an example of a robot greeter that you would see in the lobby of a hospital. And essentially, when you walk up, it can do a number of different things using technology called computer vision to be able to identify who you are and check you in, maybe if you work in the hospital. It will also be able to do mask detection to make sure you're wearing your mask correctly. And most importantly right now, it will also be able to potentially measure body temperature, which is so critical. Now, this means that, especially during a pandemic, you're not exposing another human potentially to a virus if you're coming into a hospital, but it also affects the future of jobs and the future of work. So that's something we all want to remember, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, because I'm not naive about how it will displace workers when we talk about machines and robots. In Singapore, as another example, they've already been using Spot the robot dog in parks to help to make sure people are adhering to physical distancing. So just imagine that scenario where you're in a park and all of a sudden a robot dog comes up and says, hey, you're not 6 feet apart, you need to move further apart. A little bit terrifying, but nonetheless, this is something that is taking place right now. I know Nick is going to talk more about the future and further out, but what I want to really talk about is what is happening today. And when we think about what's happening today with Spot the Robot Dog, one of the most popular robots that we're seeing for commercial purposes today, we know that this robot is being used on construction sites, already in healthcare. It costs about $75,000 US. And if you haven't seen Spot the Robot Dog on the internet, here's a look.
Hi, I'm Russell, and this is Spot. So you've probably seen this robot before, maybe hauling a truck or dancing to Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk. It's the first of this generation of semi-autonomous four-legged robots, and it does a lot more than just make videos for the internet. For about a month now, Boston Dynamics has been putting Spot to work, leasing units out to industry partners, and seeing how this kind of robot holds up in the real world.
So just how common is automation? And this is a conversation we need to have today. So when we think about the rate of automation, this is a really handy chart from the World Economic Forum, and it breaks it down for us in terms of understanding that in 2018, when it came to the division of labor, about 71% of labor was done by humans and about 29% by machines. If we look forward to 2025, we're seeing an almost 50-50 split. And I just want to remind people that this study was done in 2018. So again, imagine the acceleration that has taken place during the pandemic when more and more businesses are choosing the path of automation. So when we think about this, what does it mean for all of us? How can we incorporate machines into our lives, into our work? How can they help to make our lives better? Well, if you want to be able to think outside of the box, there's a book that I recommend called Loon Shots by Sophie Bacall. And it talks about how to nurture those crazy ideas that win wars, cure diseases, and transform industries. And it's such an important read. Because I guarantee you that right now, in terms of your mindset, if someone comes to you within your organization and they say, I have this really crazy idea, you're probably tempted to kind of tune them out. And yet at the same time, think about all of those crazy ideas that are changing the world today. Think about Uber and the founders of Uber. If they came into your office or you jumped on a Zoom call with them and they said, we have this crazy idea where people are actually going to use an app and let other people drive them around in their cars. You would have said, that's insane, it's never going to work. Same thing with Airbnb, that is a crazy idea. And yet it's these crazy ideas that are totally transforming, and not always in a good way, transportation as well as accommodations. So the truth is we need some more of those out-of-the-box ideas for the future. The third thing I want to talk about is wellness tech. And this is probably one of the biggest areas of growth that we've seen, especially being in that state of acceleration again. When we think about what's happening today, we have to focus on the fact that there are many workers who are working remotely. And we see more and more that 48% of employees will likely work remotely at least part of the time after COVID-19, compared to 30% pre-pandemic. We're also seeing that people are working longer hours, more than 40 hours a week, because they're always connected and always online. And we're seeing, a tiny little glimpse of hope in terms of the fact that the doers, when it comes to remote work, the people who get stuff done, are more likely to be those people who are rewarded for their work within remote work, not just the charming individuals that were face-to-face in the office. But nonetheless, there is also a lot of devastating news in terms of our overall health. When we think about remote work, we know that people are suffering from anxiety, being one of the biggest mental health issues affecting people working from home. And also we have to remember that a lot of people have had no training in terms of working from home. So we know whether you're working from home or you're going out and you're an essential worker, the truth is you're under an enormous amount of stress. So the question is, what is the responsibility of the organization that you're working for to take care of you? And we are seeing businesses that are stepping up. So I want to talk about a couple of innovative tech companies in the wellness space that are getting a lot of attention today. The first one I want to talk about is Calm. This is essentially a meditation guide in your pocket. There are other apps in this category like Headspace, for example, that will help you learn guided meditations. What's also worth noting is that when it comes to Calm, we see Organizations out there like Kaiser Permanente that has decided to add Calm to its digital self-care portfolio, making it available for people within that organization to use for free. And this is a trend we're likely going to continue to see. Again, organizations trying harder to look after their employees, especially when they know that they aren't necessarily well. In the world of wearables, we're also seeing some pretty incredible innovations. The Whoop Band is one example. I'm wearing one right now, so you can see it's a little woven band that goes on your wrist. You never take it off. You charge it once a week. It's as simple as that. But what's really amazing about it is the data within. So you have information about your sleep. You have information about your strain, your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability. When we talk about wearables, we can even think about the Apple Watch for seniors that has fall detection. So if we want more seniors to be able to age in place, there is absolutely a role for wearables in terms of having all of that data at their fingertips. We're also seeing companies out there that have decided to give Whoop straps to their employees. Tory Burch is one of those companies, and this is part of their overall wellness initiative. Again, knowing that in order for them to be a successful company or organization, they need to make sure that their teams are well. When it comes to mental health, as I mentioned, anxiety is on the rise. There are other tools and tech out there that can help. Woebot is one that has gotten a lot of attention. It's an automated conversational agent, and that's just a really fancy word for being a chatbot. That means that you can download Woebot and you can do check-ins, identify your mood, share how you're feeling, and have conversations, and it will encourage you to be positive in your dialogue and help you through these moments of anxiety or stress. Again, I go back to the truth that we all know. Of course, it's better if we have face-to-face interactions, but again, it's not possible for everybody, especially those with mobility issues, so there is some promising tech like this on the horizon. It also has shown to decrease symptoms of anxiety by 23%, so it's one of the best out there. So what does this mean for all of us? We need to think about cultivating team wellness, this idea that wellness is a group effort, and in order for you to function well, the teams also have to be well. This is a great resource that you can check out in terms of supporting employees' mental health. And I just want to make it clear to all of you who are at EngAGE today that I'm happy to share my slides so you can click through all of these links as well. So let's just quickly do a recap in terms of what we've covered before we get to our final tech trend. We covered the future of voice. How do you plan for a voice-first revolution? Machines. How do you find the courage to pilot and leverage the power of these machines to understand the role of automation within your organization? And also with wellness, how do you cultivate team wellness? But finally, the piece I want to talk about is the future and the future of work and automation, especially in the age of COVID. Here's a chart from Bloomberg that has been out for a couple of years that talks about the reality that 50% of jobs are at risk of changing in the coming decades because of automation. And there are lots of new jobs on the horizon as well. And when you look at this chart, you can look at this bottom quadrant here and see those jobs that are most impacted. We see house cleaners, store clerks, personal care aides, retail sales. We know these people are going to be negatively affected by automation in the future. Now, knowing that this chart is a couple years old, again, think about that layering on of the pandemic and how much this is going to accelerate in change in the months and years to come. Now, when we think about automation at work and how it can help us in so many different scenarios, generally speaking, AI will help to replace tasks, and it doesn't always replace entire jobs. I want to show you a few examples of automation where it can be useful in our lives. And one is within wellness with an app called Calorie Mama. And what Calorie Mama does is allow you to point the camera on your smartphone at whatever food you're eating. It identifies that food, and it will tell you the nutritional breakdown of that food that's in front of you. Imagine how long that used to take when you had to keep a food diary. I've done this before, write everything down, look everything up, and then have it all on pieces of paper and try to manage this. Well, now all of that can be automated, and there's a role for that in our lives as we try to live healthier. Now, when we think about automation, we're always also seeing this within the marketing space. In social media videos is one example. There's a tool called Wibbits. Wibbits will allow you to automate the process of creating social media videos. As they say, it will only take you about 7 minutes to create a video in whatever format that you need for social media. You can choose from templates, you can choose music, and it essentially stitches it all together. Now, it used to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to create video, and again, the cost has come down, and a lot of that can be automated. And finally, when we think about how important tools in our lives like email are, think about the tone of your email and how critical it is that you get the tone right. Well, Grammarly, which you probably know as a tool that will help to detect your grammar, has a new tool called Tone Detector. And what Tone Detector does is that it analyzes any type of text, whether it's an email or a document, and it tells you if you sounded defensive, or it tells you if perhaps you want to sound encouraging, what steps you could take to be able to sound a little more encouraging. So it's a very, very simple tool. It does a very simple thing, but an example again of automation in the works. Now, what skills, knowing all of this change that is taking place, not in 15, 20, or 25 years, but in the next few years, what skills are important for all of us? And this is something I bet that Nick's going to talk about as well. They are human skills. Things like creativity, critical thinking, complex problem solving, emotional intelligence, leadership. The World Economic Forum has said that these are the most important skills of the future. The declining skills are things like manual dexterity, management of personnel, coordination and time management. All of those things are not necessarily skills that are as important in the future because some of that can in fact be automated. And where does this leave all of us? If we know that the fast future is right in front of us, and we know that it's changing more quickly than any of us imagined, especially during a pandemic, we know that we have to shift our mindset to be in a constant state of learning. There is no more status quo. And no one said this better than the late futurist Alvin Toffler when he said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." This means that no matter where you are in designing the future, constant daily learning has to be part of that process. And I will even add to that and say even micro pivots where you change things up and you practice relentless adaptation, that is also a critical skill for the future. A book that I want to recommend before we wrap up is a book called Future Proof. And I just finished reading this over the past week. And in it, they talk about 9 rules for humans in the age of automation. Because there are so many things that are important as far as the future of technology that are focused on humans designing that technology in an ethical way. And this book will help you understand how to future-proof your life and how to change along with the changes that are taking place. And it's a really great guide to get you through the next few years. Because after all, we know how quickly things change. If we think back to those initial photos I showed you off the top of the presentation, 2005, just one mobile phone, 2013, everyone has mobile devices. And then all of a sudden, who could ever have anticipated 2020? No one gathered, and we're all live streaming on Zoom. That's how quickly things are likely to change as well in the future and even faster. If you're interested in the topic of emerging technology and how it affects our lives, I have a free newsletter I send out every Tuesday, no strings attached, and it's all about keeping up to date on the technology in our lives that can, in fact, make our lives better and easier for the future. You can check it out at ambermac.com/newsletter. I wanted to thank all of you for joining me today, and I look forward to your questions.